a son.
'Tis lucky you have your
To King Francis's youngest son.
Historically, women are depicted as seductresses or jilted lovers. Despite this biased coverage, women challenged norms even when they were on the back foot. So, let's take a look at 15 of these beautiful women. Number 15, Valeria Mesalina. Mesalina, a powerful Roman, had a prestigious lineage. She was related to emperors like Nero and Caligula. Her family had worked hard, even with some inbreeding, to climb the Roman social ladder. Some stories about Mesalina are from sources like Cassius Dio and Suetonius, who weren't always fair to women. However, in those wild Roman tales, there's often a grain of truth. At Mesalina's urging, her husband Claudius executed his niece Julia Livia. Her son was a rival to the throne. She also accused her niece Julia Livilla of an affair with Seneca the Younger, leading to her exile. Mesalina was likely jealous. The last surviving niece, Agrippina the Younger, faced exile twice. Her friend Statilius Taurus died after being accused of wrongdoing with Agrippina. Mesalina didn't like rivals. Cassius Dio wrote about her trying to kill Nero with snakes, but this might be exaggerated. Cassius Dio also said she was behind two senators' executions. Appius Silanus died because he caught Mesalina's eye. She created a plan that led to his death. She ordered Valerius Asiaticus and Poppaea Sabina the Elder to die for a garden. Sabina survived, but her life was tough. In 1 year, she also ordered the poisoning of Marcus Vinicius, who refused her advances. Her own downfall came from an affair with Senator Gaius Silius. Narcissus from the imperial court revealed the affair to Emperor Claudius. He thought they were plotting against him. Messalina believed marrying Silius would protect her, but Claudius wasn't fooled. She was banished from the palace and took refuge in the gardens of Lucullus. She was ordered to take her own life by the emperor, but in reality, a guard executed her. Claudius soon married Agrippina. Messalina's name was erased from public and private places. Her children, Britannicus and Octavia, suffered under Nero, Claudius's adopted son and successor. Both died. It's hard to know what Messalina was really like since history is often written by the victors, and there's not much proof for these tales. Number 14, Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn, born around 1501, became a famous but misunderstood figure in England's history. She married King Henry VIII, who later falsely accused her of crimes that led to her tragic death. Henry's marriage to Anne sparked controversy, as he was previously wed to Catherine of Aragon for nearly 2 decades. But as time passed and Catherine only bore one living child, Henry's eye fell on Anne. Anne was a smart woman from a noble family. Despite not fitting the conventional beauty standards, she was intelligent and charming. Henry, infatuated, pursued her even though he was already married. Before becoming queen, Anne was rumored to have been to France, where she served the queen. Although there are no confirmed claims about her personal history, the rumors tainted her reputation. Henry tried to divorce Catherine to marry Anne, but faced resistance from the Pope. To circumvent this, he separated from the Catholic Church and formed the Church of England, appointing Thomas Cranmer as Archbishop of Canterbury. Anne then secretly married Henry in 1533. Anne's reign as queen faced opposition. Her birth of a daughter, Elizabeth, disappointed Henry, who wanted a son. Tragically, Anne suffered multiple miscarriages and arguments with Henry, leading to severe strain in their relationship. Eventually, Henry accused Anne of adultery and treason with 5 men, including her brother. Anne was arrested, denied a defense attorney, and found guilty. She was sentenced to beheading. After her execution, stories surrounding Anne's innocence emerged, condemning Henry for her unfair death. Henry's reputation suffered, and he struggled to find future wives among European nobility. Rumors about Anne having 6 fingers or her ghost haunting the Tower of London remain, but no evidence supports these myths. Despite various portrayals of her, the truth about Anne Boleyn remains unknown. Was she a scheming woman or a victim of an entitled king? While history and research lean towards the latter, her full story remains a subject of debate, and her legacy is still deeply misunderstood. Number 13, Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace, born in 1815, was a unique woman ahead of her time. Her mother, determined to shape her away from her father's chaotic ways, focused Ada's education on science and math. Though Ada led an eventful life, she developed a love for mathematics and became a mathematician herself. At 17, Ada met Charles Babbage, the father of computing himself. She found his idea to build the analytical engine fascinating. In 1843, Ada wrote about Babbage's machine. Her notes, which were the majority of the document, included instructions for the machine to perform a sequence of Bernoulli numbers. This was the first ever published algorithm. Most significantly, Ada's notes describe the analytical engine's potential beyond just math. Babbage saw it as a calculator, but Ada realized it could do much more. She proposed the machine could manipulate symbols according to specific rules, not limited to only numbers and equations. Ada even imagined the machine composing music. She believed it could express the science of harmony and create complex pieces of music. Her foresight from calculation to general computing was a remarkable leap. While Babbage's machines were not built during his life, Ada's vision was largely forgotten for over 100 years. It wasn't until 1991 that Babbage's difference engine was constructed. Now there are displays of his machines in museums. Efforts are underway to create a replica of the analytical engine to bring Ada's algorithm to life. Ada's story is sadly familiar. The remarkable contributions of women in science and technology often go unrecognized. Ada's tale has been rediscovered, but many others remain hidden from view. Number 12. Matahari. Matahari, born in Leeuwarden in 1876, faced a roller coaster of a life. Her family initially lived comfortably until her father's bankruptcy. After her mother's passing in 1891, Matahari moved under her uncle's care in Sneek before shifting to another uncle's in The Hague. At 19, she married Rudolph MacLeod, a man more than 20 years her senior, in a hurried ceremony. They moved to the Dutch East Indies and had 2 children, but their marriage was troubled, with frequent arguments and tragic losses. Their son passed away, potentially poisoned, and the couple separated shortly after returning to the Netherlands. Finding herself in Paris, Matahari worked various odd jobs before delving into her career as a dancer. She found success with her exotic dances, gaining fame in high social circles and among influential people. When World War I began, she faced challenges. Stranded in Berlin, she attempted to perform but had to flee due to the war. With financial issues and her wealth stuck in German banks, she decided to head back to the Netherlands. Espionage allegations emerged around 1916, suggesting she became involved with German intelligence, followed by offering her services to the French. These rumors would eventually lead to her downfall. Suspected by both sides, Matahari was arrested in Paris in 1917. After a brief trial, she was found guilty of spying for the Germans and sentenced to death. Despite pleading her innocence and admitting to spying for the French, she was executed by firing squad. Matahari's life and death created widespread publicity and sparked numerous rumors, including stories that she lives to this day. Her story has inspired movies and a statue in Leeuwarden. Although findings from MI5 suggest her effectiveness as a German spy might have been overstated. Number 11. Hedy Lamar. Wi-Fi is an invaluable facet of our modern routine, allowing us to stay connected while walking around our homes. The technology behind Wi-Fi came from the wartime era of World War II, invented not by a scientist, but by a renowned Hollywood actress with a knack for tinkering, Hedy Lamar. Lamar's journey started as an actress in Europe before her move to the United States. However, her life took a turn due to the rising tensions in Europe. Born in Austria to parents of Jewish descent, her marriage to Friedrich Mandl, an ammunition manufacturer, introduced her to the world of military innovation. This exposure might have sparked her eventual journey into inventing. Fleeing to the United States, Lamar became a sought-after Hollywood star. She has married about 6 times throughout her life. She starred in a controversial film known as Ecstasy, where she appeared nude in a love scene, something which was unheard of at the time. But her focus shifted when she realized she could contribute more to the war effort. Inspired to assist the Navy, Lamar delved into inventing a communications system, together with composer George Antheil, to address the Navy's issues with radio-controlled torpedoes. Their invention aimed at enabling torpedoes to change frequencies continually, making it harder for enemies to intercept radio messages. Despite the initial rejection by the Navy due to its complexity, Lamar's invention found its way into the tech world in the 1950s. It influenced the development of CDMA, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi, although recognition for their innovation only came in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Lamar's invention, born from her experiences and artistic imagination, eventually gained recognition, demonstrating her extraordinary contribution during a scary period in history. She was never formally trained, but she still managed to create something amazing. Number 10. Jenny Jerome Churchill. Jenny Jerome Churchill, born in 1854 in Brooklyn, New York, is best known as the wife of Lord Randolph Churchill and the mother of Sir Winston Churchill, the distinguished Prime Minister of Great Britain. Coming from a wealthy American background, her life took an intriguing turn when she was taken to Paris with her sisters in 1867 due to a scandal involving their father. Under her mother's guidance, she received an education that was on par with the European upper class. In 1873, she met Lord Randolph Churchill, and the two were married the next year. Jenny's liveliness, wit, and beauty earned her immense social success in London, and she actively supported her husband's political career. Some historians even suggest she played a critical role, not just as a hostess, but as a de facto campaign manager for Lord Randolph. She had many affairs over the course of her life. The most notorious one was with King Edward VII. This affair took place while Jenny was married to Randolph with 2 children. But it came to an end when Edward's wife found out. She also significantly contributed to the formation of the Primrose League, a platform for discussing social and political issues, enabling both men and women to engage in the Conservative Party. After Lord Randolph's passing, she found herself at a loss for a time. Jenny's post-Randolph life was full of variety. In 1899, she established and briefly edited the Anglo-Saxon Review. During the South African War, she organized funds for a hospital ship, the Maine, which provided vital service in South Africa. Engaging in writing, she produced various works, including Reminiscences of Lady Randolph Churchill and the play Her Borrowed Plumes. Her life took turns with 2 subsequent marriages, and some labeled her behavior in her later years as eccentric, although her independence and originality had always been seen as unusual in Victorian Britain. Number 9. Helen of Troy. The legendary Helen of Troy found herself in a story told throughout the ages, a story where a war was fought over her, as described in Homer's Iliad. Believed to be the daughter of Zeus, and later married to King Menelaus of Sparta, Helen's life took a turn when she was abducted by the Trojan prince Paris. This abduction set off the famous Trojan War, a conflict narrated repeatedly in ancient Greek and Roman myths. The war's origins lay in a beauty contest where Paris was tasked with judging among the 3 goddesses, Aphrodite, Hera, and Athena. Aphrodite, offering the love of the world's most beautiful woman as a prize, lured Paris by the promise. Subsequently, he awarded this prize to Helen, leading him to abduct her from her husband, Menelaus. Throughout the war, Helen faced a conflict between her allegiance to Menelaus and her affection for Paris. Eventually, fatigued by the ongoing strife, she abandoned Paris and returned to Menelaus after the cunning Trojan horse incident that enabled the Greeks to breach Troy, concluding the war. Though the story of Helen of Troy is mythical, it has real-world implications. Her beauty symbolized feminine allure and power, portrayed extensively in ancient Greek and later literature and art. She was considered the most beautiful woman globally, and her visage, according to myth, could launch 1,000 ships. Her beauty extended beyond the physical. She had intellectual and spiritual grace. Her presence was potent and influential in literature and art. Artists and writers celebrated her allure, depicting her as powerful and captivating, symbolizing feminine strength and allure. Helen became a muse, inspiring poetry and artwork that honored her beauty, securing her place among the pantheon of female archetypes. Number 8. Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor of Aquitaine was a famous woman in the Middle Ages. She wore the crowns of both England and France. People even call her the first feminist. During the Second Crusade with her first husband, Louis VII, rumors about an affair swirled, but there was no proof. Accused of adultery and incest, Eleanor spent most of the crusade under close watch. Her marriage to Louis ended in divorce. Soon after, she married Henry of Anjou, who became the King of England in 1154. He built an empire spanning from Scotland to the Pyrenees. There were tales accusing Eleanor of murdering Henry's lover, Rosamund Clifford. Though she was a prisoner at the time, such stories created a scandal. It's unclear if these tales were true. Eleanor did, however, rebel against her husband in 1173, supporting her son's revolt. Her son Henry and others rebelled against King Henry II, and Eleanor sided with them. When the rebellion failed, Henry accepted his son's submission, but Eleanor was captured. She dressed in men's clothing while trying to escape to France. Women rebelling against their husbands was rare, so Eleanor faced harsh punishment. 15 years of imprisonment in various castles. She was only released after King Henry II died, and her son Richard I became the king. While stories accused her of many things, she was imprisoned for her unprecedented act of rebellion. Her life was a series of dramatic events, from crusades and divorce to rebellion, imprisonment, and accusations. But history isn't always clear on the truth behind these stories. Number 7. Isabeau of Bavaria. Isabeau of Bavaria's stories paints her as the most ruthless and wicked queen. Centuries of tales accuse her of various crimes like adultery, incest, and treason. Historians describe her as both beautiful and obese, but not in a kind way. They claim her corruption led to neglecting her children and betraying her husband and country. But they didn't mention how her husband was going insane. She was married to King Charles VI of France, known as Charles the Mad, whose mental health declined over time. He even killed 4 knights during one breakdown and believed he was made of glass in another. Isabeau had to manage to raise her children and handle court politics mostly alone, while dealing with her husband's mental illness at the same time. Her alliance with Louis of Orleans, her husband's brother, resulted in her imprisonment because of false rumors of adultery and incest from the opposition. Yet, tales don't consider the challenges faced by a queen dealing with a husband's worsening mental state. France was in the midst of the 100 Years' War with England, which was turning in England's favor after their victory at Agincourt. Isabeau was pressured to sign the Treaty of Troy in 1420, disinheriting her own son, the Dauphin, and making Henry V the heir to King Charles. This decision handed over France to England. Even though Isabeau has been cleared of many accusations against her, she signed away her son's inheritance to a foreign power. Number 6. Zoe, Empress of Constantinople. Zoe Porphyrogenita lived quietly until she married Emperor Romanos III at the age of 50 and became empress when he took the throne in 1028. She was known for her beauty, commanding presence, and passionate interests. While empress, Zoe faced neglect from her husband Romanos. He took a mistress and denied her access to the treasury. Zoe, in response, took a younger lover named Michael. Together, they planned to remove Romanos, leading to his death in 1034. Zoe married Michael and made him Emperor Michael IV. Their marriage, however, was troubled. Michael limited Zoe's authority. After a while, he banished Zoe to a monastery. Yet Zoe was determined to reclaim her power. She brought Michael IV's nephew into the family and named him her successor. Michael IV died of natural causes in 1041, avoiding the fate of his predecessor. Zoe's adopted son, Michael V, became the next emperor, but his rule was disastrous, leading to Zoe's return to power after a brief time in a monastery. Michael V was dethroned and blinded as a sign that he couldn't rule. At 64, Zoe became empress once more, ruling with her sister Theodora. But her throne was always placed a bit further than Theodora's, signifying who the real ruler was. She married Emperor Constantine IX. The three of them ruled the empire together. Zoe's reign was marked by ruthlessness. She wasn't hesitant to remove rivals, including husbands and even her adopted son. Constantine outlived Zoe, who passed away in 1050 at around 72 years old. Zoe, a determined empress, had a firm grip on power and wasn't afraid to eliminate threats to her rule, even if they were family members. It's time for today's subscriber pick. One of our subscribers shared this image of a stunning woman with us. Well, we say image, but we can't tell if it's a photo or just a very detailed portrait. But more importantly, who is this woman? Is this a reconstruction of someone from our distant history? She looks like a character straight out of Game of Thrones, one that's extremely influential and powerful. So, was she a major player in history? Maybe a queen of a country? Either way, we're curious about her, but we don't know where to start. So here's where you, the viewers, can help us. Let us know in the comments section below if you have any ideas as to who this person and her history is. And remember to include the hashtag #subscriberpick. We can't wait for your answers. Now, let's move on to our next topic. Number 5, Isabella of Angoulême. Isabella of Angouléme's life began with an early marriage to King John when she was perhaps only 10 or 12. The king was known for mistreating women and even killing his own nephew. During their 16-year marriage, they had 5 children, the youngest named Eleanor. When King John passed away in 1216, Isabella didn't prioritize caring for her children. After her eldest son, Henry III, became king, she swiftly planned to return to her lands in Angoulême, France. By 1217, she left England to arrange her daughter Joan's wedding, but she never came back. Joan, betrothed at just 4 years old to Hugh X de Lusignan, Count of La Marche, faced an unexpected twist in 1220. In a shocking scandal, Hugh X renounced Joan and married Isabella instead, breaking the betrothal contract. Joan, now only 9 years old, found herself in a disconcerting situation with her once betrothed becoming her stepfather. However, the situation worsened. Instead of returning to England as expected, Joan wasn't sent back, but held as Hugh's hostage. Her captivity guaranteed Hugh's control over her lands and assured the transfer of his new wife's inheritance. England also withheld Isabella's lands until Joan's properties were returned. Isabella, in a letter to her son Henry III, aimed to explain her controversial decision. She justified replacing her own daughter as Hugh's bride. Isabella claimed Hugh's friends were concerned about Joan's young age and convinced Hugh to dismiss the English princess in favor of an older French bride capable of bearing a son. Isabella married Hugh to prevent him from joining the French and to ensure his loyalty to her son. Isabella did not retire peacefully. In 1224, she and Hugh betrayed Henry by allying with the King of France. They supported a French invasion of Poitou, lands belonging to her son, the King of England. Despite reconciling with Henry in 1230, Isabella and Hugh continued to manipulate the kings of France and England, always seeking an advantage. In 1242, when Henry III invaded Poitou, Hugh X initially supported his English stepson, only to change sides again. Isabella herself was implicated in a plot to poison King Louis IX of France and his brother, but the plan was foiled at the last moment. Number 4, Isabella of France. Isabella of France, married to England's Edward II, journeyed to France in 1325, seeking to negotiate with her brother, King Charles IV. France had seized Edward's lands. Isabella felt mistreated, watched, and tormented by Hugh Despenser, her husband's disliked confidant. After 17 years of marriage, Isabella refused to return home. Isabella took refuge in France with her son Edward, the heir to the throne, and received support from those dissatisfied with Edward's rule. With help from her advisor Roger Mortimer, she gathered backing to invade England in 1326. This led to Edward and Hugh's capture in Wales. Edward was imprisoned at Berkeley Castle. Hugh Despenser faced a trial in Hereford. Blamed for wrecking Isabella's marriage and seizing her wealth, his fate was predetermined. Despenser faced a ghastly execution. Paraded through the city, he suffered a torturous death, one which involved a hanging and more. Isabella's husband, Edward II, may have been executed in the same brutal manner. Some claim he fled to the continent and died in Italy, while others argue he was killed in Berkeley Castle. although not through the infamous method involving a red-hot poker. Regardless, Isabella's vengeance was fulfilled. Despenser was obliterated, Edward was deposed, and their son Edward III took the throne at 14. Isabella and Mortimer ruled England for 3 years, but were overthrown by Edward III at 18 due to their mismanagement. Mortimer was hanged, and Isabella spent her final years under house arrest. She went from being the she-wolf who invaded England and dethroned and possibly killed her husband to being overthrown herself. Number 3, Ethelflade. Ethelflade, daughter of King Alfred the Great, married Ethelred, an ealdorman. She wasn't just a quiet wife, but a brave, influential figure, often seen as Ethelred's partner. Even before his death, she exercised power in Mercia. After his death in 911, Ethelflade led the Mercians against the Danes, along with her brother, King Edward of Wessex. They fought against Viking invasions. In 917, Ethelflade captured Derby after losing 4 important leaders. 4 of her favored ministers were slain inside the gates. In 918, she seized Leicester, causing the Danes to surrender. Her strong forces and fair treatment led the Danes to seek peace. Representatives from York promised to surrender to her. Ethelflade fought against the Welsh, Norse, and Danes, but it's unclear if she fought with a sword in hand. She was merciful in victory but vengeful if her friends were attacked. When her friend Abbot Egbert was murdered in 916, she swiftly led an army to Wales for revenge. Her army burned Brycheiniog and took many hostages, including the Welsh queen Angharad. When the Welsh king submitted to her, he promised to serve her and compensate for the murder of the abbot and his people. Ethelflade died suddenly on June 918. She didn't see the success of her efforts, but by 920, all Danish territories south of Yorkshire had been conquered, thanks to her and her brother's hard work. Number 2, Margaret Campbell. Margaret Campbell, a wealthy heiress, married Duke Ian Campbell in 1951, but by 1954 they'd had enough of each other and began the divorce process, which turned into a massive scandal. The Duke claimed Margaret had affairs with 88 men. During the divorce hearings, he presented scandalous Polaroids, showing Margaret performing intimate acts with unknown men, nicknamed the Headless Man. It was a nasty divorce. Both sides hired private investigators to find dirt on the other. In 1963, the Duke revealed Margaret's private diary and photos showing her nude and engaged in explicit acts. Within 3 hours, the judge granted the divorce, criticizing Margaret as a highly amorous woman, suggesting her accident in 1943 triggered this promiscuous behavior. The Duke took his fair share of damage, too. His reputation took a hit. He was even blackballed from his club, White's. Despite society's judgment, Margaret remained defiant. However, the court ordered her to pay the bulk of her ex-husband's legal fees, a staggering amount, over $1.4 million today. This divorce tarnished her reputation and impacted her deeply. Number 1. Sophie Germaine. Sophie Germaine, a passionate French woman from the late 1700s to the early 1800s, defied society's norms by pursuing her love for mathematics, even though her parents disapproved. She discovered her interest in math while exploring her father's library, inspired by the story of Archimedes. But her parents felt math wasn't suitable for a young lady. Despite her parents' disapproval, Sophie continued her mathematical studies. She even learned Greek and Latin to understand older texts. Back then, women weren't allowed to attend lectures, so instead, she opted to secure the lecture notes. She cleverly used the alias Monsieur Leblanc to obtain the forbidden lecture notes. She even exchanged letters with famous mathematicians of the time, like Carl Friedrich Gauss and Joseph Louis Lagrange. Sophie's work on Fermat's last theorem is hailed as her greatest contribution to mathematics. But her true gift to society might have been breaking barriers for women in mathematics. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.